Teachers ask a lot of questions for various reasons: to stimulate thinking on a new topic or to find out what students have learned. A young fourth grade teacher had just finished what they thought was a slam-bang lesson on the Declaration of Independence. As a review, the teacher posed some questions, beginning with, where was the Declaration of Independence signed? One hand shot up a little faster than the others, and in reply, the student looked the teacher in the eye and confidently answered, at the bottom. Today's gospel casts Jesus in a familiar role of teacher. He was addressed as teacher at least 60 times in the Gospels, whether it was by the multitudes or by his disciples. In John 13, Jesus himself says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am." We find Jesus gathered with his disciples in Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi was a bit of a backwater, only mentioned twice in the Bible, in today's gospel and in Mark's version of the same story. But as Matthew tells us, Jesus was traveling throughout all of Galilee and teaching in all the towns and villages. By all accounts, Caesarea Philippi was a beautiful but remote area, and Jesus takes this opportunity to spend some quality time with his disciples away from the usual crowds that would follow him. So Jesus, in full teacher mode, begins quizzing the disciples. Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Jesus is referred to as the Son of Man dozens of times in the New Testament, but what exactly does this term signify? One popular meaning is that it is a title of humanity, letting us know that Jesus is a real human being, coming to us in the flesh, as 1 John tells us. Another meaning of Son of Man is in reference to an Old Testament prophecy that comes from Daniel, the 7th chapter, verses 13 through 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. Who do the crowds say that I am? The disciples replied, John the Baptist, Elijah, this prophet or that. The crowds considered Jesus to be an important person, but they had yet to comprehend just how important he was. Jesus continues his lesson with another question, putting the disciples on the spot. Who do you say that I am? Jesus was doing more than testing his disciples. Here he is trying to get them to consider their level of faith. Remember Jesus' admonishment of Peter after fishing him out of the sea, you of little faith? Had the disciples learned all the lessons and advanced to the level of genuine faith, which I found described as abandoning all human reliance on self-efforts and placing total dependence upon God's character, his actions, and his promises. But who do you say that I am? Jesus is asking them, are you following the unknowing crowds, or have you been paying attention to what I've been trying to teach you? Apparently Simon Peter has been paying attention, for he is the one to answer for the disciples. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Here, he has not only identified Jesus as the Christ, but he has also proclaimed his divine nature, the Son of the living God. The disciples' eyes have been opened. It has all become clear. Jesus was a long-awaited Messiah, and more than that, he was the Son of God. Like the crowds, the disciples knew that Jesus was special. After all, they had been witnesses to many of his miracles. But now it has been revealed to them that he is much more than a prophet. He is God in the flesh, the Son of Man. Jesus is very pleased with Peter, saying in verses 17 and 18, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Interestingly enough, this is the first use of the word church in the New Testament. Jesus is not only revealing his true identity to the disciples, but he is also declaring the beginning of his church. "I will build my church," he says. The gospel reading concludes with verse 20. "Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ." Now, I thought this was a rather curious statement and ending. Shouldn't the disciples have been out there declaring this good news that they've just learned? But this brings us back to the issue of faith. If the disciples, with all their time spent following and learning from Jesus, were just now deemed ready for Christ to reveal himself, the crowds certainly were not. Jesus had more work to do. He was still preparing his kingdom. He had more miracles to perform. He had more teaching to do. So where are we in our faith journey? Are we more like the crowds, not quite sure what to make of this man Jesus? Or are we like the disciples, advanced in our faith and understanding the true nature of the Christ? A lot of us are somewhere in between, I suspect, and maybe that's the way it should be. To quote one of my resources, "The disciples' faith needed to mature to the point that they could hear and understand. All of us are called to grow in our faith. There is always more to know of Christ. All of us are called to grow in our faith. There is always more to know of Christ." Amen.